This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Alors?
Order.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Took my idea last year to remove GST off rental housing construction. It's the only thing he's done right, because of course after 9 years he's doubled housing costs. So yesterday I came up with another common sense idea. Let me quote his housing advisor, Mike Moffat. The Conservative leaders plan to eliminate the GST for newly constructed homes selling for under $1 million is the boldest middle-class housing proposal released to date from any federal political party. Will he accept my common sense idea?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Over the decades, Canadians learned the hard way. With Conservative promises, you always have to check the fine print. And the fine print on this one is they're going to cut the investments we're making across the country, working with municipalities to cut red tape, to invest in more housing, to invest in more affordable homes, to accelerate permitting and create densification. He's going to cut the services and programs and investments that Canadians are counting on to solve this housing crisis. That's all he offers, Mr. Speaker. Cuts to the programs and supports that Canadians need, whether it's the housing accelerator or housing and infrastructure investments. He's going to build slow homes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He named the two bureaucracies I'll get rid of. One is ironically named the Housing Infrastructure Fund. $5 billion. How many houses is it built? Zero. How many pieces of infrastructure? Zero. Can you even apply for money for it? No. It's just for bureaucrats. Then there's the Housing Accelerator Fund, which his own Liberal housing minister says the fund doesn't go towards the cost of building houses. It doesn't actually lead to the construction of specific homes. The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually directly build homes. So why not take the money, axe the tax, and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is intending to cut the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is all about creating densification across our communities, accelerating the permitting and cutting red tape, using more public lands, creating more opportunities for public land to be used for the creation of affordable homes. It's about changing the way homes get built so they get built faster and more accessibly for Canadians. He's about cutting the programs and the services that Canadians rely on. That's what Canadians have learned about Conservative promises. Got to look at the fine print, and the fine print is cuts to things Canadians need.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Cuts to taxes Canadians pay, Mr. Speaker. We will axe the tax, the sales tax on new homes under $1 million, saving up to $50,000 on a new home or $2,700 in lower mortgage payments every single year. By contrast, in the last 3 years, the number of young people who have ownership of a home today has fallen by half under this Prime Minister and his incompetent housing minister. So why won't he cut the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canadians have learned when Conservatives make promises, you've got to check the fine print. And the fine print on this one is cutting programs that are investing in building new homes right across the country, working with municipalities and delivering the homes that Canadians, particularly young Canadians, need. Now, if the Leader of the Opposition actually cared about young Canadians, he wouldn't be standing against the fact that we're asking wealthier Canadians to pay a little more in taxes to help young Canadians with buying a home, with creating a future, with creating the jobs that they need. We're going to continue to invest in young people for intergenerational fairness while he gives tax breaks to wealthiest.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. It's like the insane asylum. The Conservatives want to invest, table a motion to get rid of the government. They have to stop filibustering. And now the Conservatives are protecting the government, strangely enough. And now the Conservatives' obstruction seems to be in favour of the Liberals because they don't want to work more. Can we stop this nonsense and trigger an election Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We can clearly see who is here in this House to play politics and who's here to work. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc has done a flip-flop after voting 188 times to keep this government in power. It's the most centralizing and expansionist government in history. They've kept them in power. They voted two more times this fall in a confidence vote, even though they gave nothing to farmers or seniors. Once again, can the Bloc vote with us to end this government that does less for Quebec?
Will the NDP finally break off its costly coalition with the government and call a carbon tax election?
I listened carefully to the question of the Leader of the Opposition. We've been through this before. At some point, the chair is going to have to cut questions if we continue to have questions which don't deal with the administration of government. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the very angry housing minister has been up all night trying to dream up some snarky comment in response to the very popular announcement Common Sense Conservatives made yesterday to axe the federal sales tax on homes under $1 million. Something that his own advisor, Dr. Mike Moffat, has said is the most bold announcement of any federal party for middle-class home ownership. He took my idea on GST for rental housing. Will he accept this common sense plan to axe the tax?
There's a lot of chatter coming. I can only identify the member from New Westminster Burnaby, but I would warn other members, please, to not take the floor unless recognized by the chair. It's important for question period to happen during the time that it's supposed to happen. The Honourable Minister for Infrastructure, Housing and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, with all the time and energy he spends on me, I'm going to have to send him a check for the time I've been living rent-free in his head. But I got to tell you, yesterday, make no mistake, the Conservative leader announced he would make multi-billion-dollar cuts to programs that will get homes built in this country. Now, he knows that, and we can agree on that piece. What he doesn't know is his caucus colleagues have been going behind his back, writing me letters advocating for their communities to receive funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund because they believe it will get more homes built. My question for the Conservative members of his caucus, will they have the courage to stand up and tell him he's wrong?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's the only rent he hasn't doubled. And nobody else has to tell that member that he's wrong because he told himself. This is what he said about his own Housing Accelerator Fund. Let me quote it. The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually go towards the cost of building houses. It doesn't actually lead to the construction of specific homes. The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually directly build homes. And he's right. Since he started forking over these big checks, construction has gone down in the major municipalities that has received it. So will he cut the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the homes?
I ask all members once again, including the member from Hamilton Centre, to please not take the floor. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, there was a time not so long ago when the Conservative leader was actually advocating the government do more to increase density near the services that people need. Infrastructure already exists. There was a time when he was actually advocating to do something to reduce development cost charges to make it cheaper to build homes in this country. There was a time he was advocating the government do something to actually speed up the process of permitting. Now that we've actually moved forward with billions of dollars of investments that are getting homes built, making changes, he's changed his view and says we should do nothing on any of these programs and blames the government for making the investments he once thought was a good idea. We're going to do what it takes to build homes. I wish he'd join us.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's done precisely the opposite. Since he gave Toronto $500 million, that city hall has jacked up development taxes by 40%. No wonder construction is down 20%. That's probably why Dr. Mike Moffat, the minister's housing advisor, said that it's hard to deny that the Housing Accelerator Fund is turning out to be nothing more than a heist of tax dollars flowing from the feds to the municipality. Wow. So enough with the heists. Won't he cut the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the home?
Yay!
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I sometimes ask myself where they found this guy. He twists the facts to suit his narrative whenever he wants. It's almost like the Conservative Party, when looking for a new leader, hopped on Temu, typed in far-right Conservative, and then spit this guy out instead. He opposes investments in affordable housing. He borrows lessons from his cousin south of the border when he opposes birth control for women. During the January 6th of Canada, the convoy, he wasn't just telling people to stand by, he was bringing them coffee in the streets. Mr. Speaker, it might be election season in America. We don't need this far right-wing populism here at home.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of leadership contestants, that member must be so uptight and angry because the polling shows that though Canadians want to fire that Prime Minister, the Housing Minister ranks dead last in the polls to replace him. And why wouldn't he? This is the guy who lost track of 1 million people when he was Immigration Minister.
Right.
He ignored warnings from his own department that letting in 200% more people would cause a housing shortage. And his own government spent the last week trashing his entire immigration record. How can arrogance and incompetence so comfortably reside in one man?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader asks how arrogance and incompetence can live so comfortably in one man. He manages to show us every single day. Mr. Speaker, let's actually look at the facts. While he's concerned about my polling numbers, I'm concerned about helping people in need. We put billions of dollars on the table to build or repair hundreds of thousands of homes in this country so vulnerable Canadians have a roof over his head. Let's look at his record. The worst level of home building in the last 10 years. And when he had the chance to help the most vulnerable, he simply got 6 units built across the entire country. The only thing he's done to help vulnerable people is show up with a video camera to treat those living without a roof over their head as props, and it's unacceptable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the sum total of the chaos in our immigration system that happened under this government happened while he was the minister. Yeah. His own subsequent Liberal successor has now denounced him and blamed him and his policies for the housing shortfall we have today. And now as housing minister, since he took office, the number of young people who own a home has gone from 47% down to 26% as he builds bureaucracy to block homes. Why doesn't he realize his failure, accept my common sense plan to axe the tax and build the home?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has said there's been consensus on immigration for 150 years. That means he's okay with the Chinese head tax. That means he's okay with not letting Jews in after the Second World War. That means, Mr. Speaker, that he's okay, and we know it already, he was in cabinet, he was okay with the barbaric practices snitch line. How does he want to fix things, Mr. Speaker? He wants to use math. Well, the last time he used math, he was the housing minister, and he could barely count to 6.
Mr. Speaker, I was dismayed that earlier in question period, in response to the Leader of the Opposition's question on housing, the Minister of Housing treated these questions like they were a joke. The reality, no, seriously, listen to them laugh now. Today, Scotiabank said that nearly 25% less Canadians can own a home now than when the minister took office. This is on top of the fact that housing has doubled under this government. Housing should be for everyone. Will the minister commit to axing the federal GST on new homes so that young Canadians can afford them?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for her question. And to be clear, what the Conservative Party announced yesterday was billions of dollars worth of cuts to programs that are actually going to get homes built in this country. While she has portrayed herself as having a moral high ground in her question, I would remind her that it is a Conservative leader who showed up in Niagara with a video crew so he could call a woman's home a shack. It was her leader who goes to encampments across this country, not to see what he can do to help people, to put them in the background of his social media videos for likes. Mr. Speaker, people who are unhoused are not political props. They are human beings that deserve to be treated with respect.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Nose Hill.
The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually directly build homes. Who said that? The Minister of Housing! This is the same man who juiced temporary visas knowing that students were sleeping under bridges and were performing sex acts because they couldn't afford rent. This minister has been allowed to fail upwards. Even his caucus members know that. So when will the Prime Minister stop letting this minister fail upwards while Canadians are failing to pay their rent?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the attempt to link very challenging life circumstances to the government's Housing Accelerator Fund is beyond disingenuous. She wants to talk about what her colleague members know. They know that this fund is actually helping get more housing built in this country. There is a number of them who are writing me personally asking that their communities be picked for funding because they know that it's going to succeed in building more homes in their cities. Mr. Speaker, my question is whether they will have the courage to actually stand up and tell their leader that he is wrong to make billions of dollars of cuts to housing like he was wrong when he did it when he was the minister.
Member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, after 9 years, Indigenous peoples and families living in rural and remote Ontario know the NDP Liberals aren't worth the cost. The impact of the carbon tax on the cost of groceries is a real issue for those trying to make ends meet and feed their families. Hunger Count 2024 reports there are over 2 million visits to food banks across Canada in March of last year. That's up 90% since 2019. When will the Prime Minister stop ignoring the evidence, admit their carbon tax scheme isn't working, and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a moment, I thought my official critic was going to ask a question about Indigenous peoples. But again, we saw a return to their talking points, not the kinds of things that matter to the First Nations people that I've been working so hard with along with my colleagues. In fact, that member voted against Indigenous health care, Grassy Narrows care home, emergency management support, schools, roads, housing, water. You get the picture, Mr. Speaker. They're no friends to Indigenous people.
The Honourable Member from Coastal Bay Central, Notre Dame.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Yesterday, Food Banks Canada reported that the need for food banks is spiralling out of control, with 2 million Canadians per month depending on them. Demand at Bridges to Hope Food Bank in St. John's is expected to surge 30% compared to 2023. Despite record-smashing food bank usage, the NDP Liberals increased the cost of groceries by raising the carbon tax 23%. Mr. Speaker, instead of quadrupling the carbon tax, will they axe the tax so that people can afford to eat?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, what they would axe in a place like Newfoundland, remember, the Conservative leader said the dental care program didn't exist. right? Said it's not going to work, not going to happen. Newfoundland now happens to be one of the leading places in the country for people getting care. And on average, it's saving them $730. Do you know that what it's going to save our emergency rooms and creating space? About $1.8 billion, the opportunity to serve emergency rooms. Imagine those savings. That's what they're going to cut. So when they look vulnerable people in the eye, tell them the truth. Tell them what you're going to do. You're going to take away their dental care. You're going to make sure they don't get the diabetes medication they need, and that's going to cost them big money, Mr.
The honourable member from Kildone and St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of Liberals, crime is up and small businesses are fed up. The Liberal Prime Minister changed the laws to make it easier for violent repeat offenders to get bail, and now break-and-enters, thefts, vandalism have become everyday realities for small businesses in Canada. Nearly 60% of small businesses in BC, for example, are being directly impacted by crime. 8 in 10 are worried about their personal safety. This has cost businesses thousands of dollars, driving up costs of food and goods for their customers. When will the Liberals reverse their catch and release policy so that Canadians can shop safely and affordably once again?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spent 39 years fighting crime in the City of Toronto, and one of the things I learned in that 39 years is that cops count. But, Mr. Speaker, today there are 700 fewer police officers in the City of Toronto than when I was the police chief. And those are the same cops, by the way, who fought guns and gangs, gave evidence at bail hearings, and kept our neighbourhood safe. But just like the Harper government that cut 1,000 RCMP positions, Conservative mayors and premiers have frozen police hiring. This is the price we're all paying for reckless Conservative cuts. And if the Conservatives are looking for causation of the rising crime, look in the mirror.